Anybody feel really confident?
Okay. I'll train you. I'll tell you exactly what you have to do. Okay. So we're going to start off, most of the stuff we're looking at today you have done before as far as solving inequalities. The difference is going to be in how we write our answer. So starting now, instead of using less than and greater than in our final answer, we are going to be switching to what's called interval notation. So in interval notation, if I want to say like x is less than 2. If you think about on a number line, if you have a 2, you guys have graphed that with an open circle and you draw a line going to the left, right? Interval notation gives a starting and a stopping point. So it'll be something, comma, something every time. We use parentheses and brackets. Parentheses mean not equal to. Brackets mean equal to. Okay, and our answer can have a combination. It can have one parenthesis and one bracket in it, depending on the problem. So if I were looking at this, if I were giving my starting and my stopping point, you go left to right, small to large. This is going forever in the negative direction. If something never stops, we call that infinity. Since this is in the negative direction, it is negative infinity. So we have a negative and infinity, it's just like a sideways 8. Now, infinity is not an actual number. So can you equal infinity? No. So if we can't equal, we use a parenthesis. So it's parenthesis, negative infinity, comma. My stopping point. We stop when we get to 2. We were not equal to 2, so would it have a parenthesis or a bracket? Parenthesis. If we're going forever in the positive direction, that's just a positive infinity. If I switched this and made it equal to 2, what would change in my notation? Right. We would put a bracket on just the 2. So you would have one parenthesis and one bracket. So today, when we solve these, we're going to practice writing all of our answers in that notation. So the first example I have is just strictly trying to go back and forth between the two, and then we're going to solve some problems. Once you do a few of them, you'll catch on, and it's not too bad. So I want to write this using interval notation. So some people can just look at the inequalities, especially when we're beginning. Some people need a number line. I'm not real picky on the graphing your number lines. You don't have to like make a number line going from -10 to +10 or anything like that. I guess I kind of cheat. I'm starting at 1 and going to 3. Okay. The way you've graphed this before, you would have used a closed circle here. What I want you to do, we're going to go ahead on our number lines too. We're going to use parentheses and brackets. Okay. So it was an equal to, so would it have a parenthesis or a bracket? Okay. And you want your brackets to face one another. So it would start here and it ends at 3. It was equal to, so it's a bracket. So your number line just looks like this. So your interval notation is bracket. Because of the equal to, it started at 1, comma, ended at 3, and it was equal to, so the 3 gets a bracket. So can you tell me what your notation would look like on B?
Parentheses, -4, 0 parentheses.
No equal to, so parentheses, this starts at -4, comma, it ends at 0, not equal to, so the 0 gets a parenthesis as well. C. If you think about it on a number line, greater than 5 would start at 5 and be going to the right. Would it be a parenthesis or a bracket? Parenthesis. Okay. So my interval notation starts at 5 with a parenthesis, comma, it's everything larger so it never stops, so I put infinity. Alright, D. Less than or equal to 1. So parenthesis or bracket on the 1? Bracket, and you put the bracket facing the direction you're going to shade. So we're going this way. So it would look like this.
Like clean these two tables up.
Can I keep this?
Go for it.
Okay, thanks.
Go for it. Thank you.
Alright, so going from left to right, this is coming from parenthesis or bracket? Comma ends at 1 with a bracket. What if I said all real numbers? That means everything on the number line. What would I write?
Parentheses, negative infinity, comma, parentheses. Comma, infinity, parentheses.
Yeah. Negative infinity, positive infinity. Both of them get parentheses. Good. I'll get it for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Alright. Let's go the other way. If I gave you an interval, could you tell me what the original inequality was? So if this one, it was a bracket on the 1 and a parenthesis on the 4. What was that original inequality then?
1 is less than or equal to x is less than.
Good.
Sorry.
I'm just excited to actually have people volunteer in class. Makes it so much nicer when everybody answers me. Alright, B, 2 to infinity. What does that mean? So it'd be x is, yeah, it's talking about this, so it's everything larger than 2. So x is greater than 2 was the original inequality. C. This one is saying everything between 2 and 3. So what would I put? Good. D. Negative infinity to negative 3. So that's saying it's looks like this. So alright, how do you guys feel about the interval notation? We're just going to solve some inequalities now, and we're going to write all of our answers in that notation, so we'll keep practicing it. Okay? If I asked you to solve this inequality, what would you do first? get the x on the same side, so subtract the 12x.
Oh, yeah. For some reason I thought the plus sign was
Like a multiplication. So subtract that over, so I have a negative 6x is less than 8. Solving an inequality is just like solving an equation, except if you multiply or divide by a negative, what happens?
you look at the sign.
So if I divide this by negative 6, then that flips. 8 over negative 6 would just be a negative 4/3. I'm not scared. Okay, so my number line, if you guys are drawing this and don't have one, I was cheating, just put this, but if it's between two numbers, just at least put a negative 1 and negative 2. Negative 4/3, that's like negative 1 and 1/3. Parenthesis and or bracket. Parenthesis, which way is it going to be shaded? To the right, so parenthesis, you're welcome. Going to the right, what would our notation be then?
Parentheses, negative 4/3, comma, infinity.
So on these, I will probably say, give me the interval notation. Always, from here on out, anytime we solve an inequality or answer, we're using interval notation. And the homework will probably ask you to graph on some of them as well. Is that one okay? Let's do this one. This is a compound inequality. We've got two inequalities in here. Okay. When you have something like this, we can solve it all at once, but instead of like two sides of an equation, there are essentially three. So whatever you do to one piece, you do to all three. So I'm trying to get my x by itself. Where do we start? Okay, so we add it to everything. So 0 plus 6 is 6, less than or equal to 2x, less than or equal to 10. And then divide by 2. Do I have to flip my inequalities?
No.
So 3 less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 5. Okay, interval notation, what would it be?
Bracket 3, comma, bracket.
If you're struggling with that, graph it first. This says x is between 3 and 5. The equal to tell me both of those have a bracket. And if you're looking at the graph, the interval notation is really straightforward. I have a bracket on my 3, comma, it ends at my 5. You guys ready for a problem? Here's yours. First step, multiply the 4 to everything. So we have negative 12. In the middle, does that become 8x minus 4? No, those 4's dropped out, so it's just 2x minus 1. 0 times 4 is 0. Then we add our 1 to everything. Divide by 2. As far as fraction versus decimal, I don't care which way you write your answer as long as it's exact. So 11/2, you could write it as negative 5.5, that's fine, but if it was 1/3, I don't want you to tell me 0.3. I want you to keep it as a fraction. I typically use fractions, but as long as it's a nice decimal, I don't care if you use a decimal. So if you were graphing this one, it starts at negative 5.5. There's no equal to, so it's parenthesis. Ends at positive 1/2, no equal to, parenthesis. The shade in between. So my interval notation is parenthesis, negative 11/2, comma, 1/2. Okay. One last problem like this. What's the first step? So we get negative 10 less than negative 2x less than or equal to negative 9. And then
Divide by negative 2.
what happens when you do that?
Flip your signs.
Okay. So what this says, x is smaller than 5 but bigger than 9x, 4.5. Or if you need to, you can flip that around. That makes 9 halves less than or equal to x is less than 5. So it would be what in interval notation? Okay. I'm just graphing things between 4.5 and 5.
Why do you flip it around again?
When you do these compound inequalities, we always want small to large. So since my 9.9/2 is smaller, and when you do that, you flip the 9/2 and the 5, you flip your inequalities as well. Any questions there? That's the end of what your homework looks like for tonight. I am going to do a couple problems just to get us started for next week. On Monday, you guys will be online that day, so we're still looking at inequalities, but we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. So I wanted to do a couple in-person examples with you guys before then, but you won't have any homework like this until Monday when I work some more examples. Okay, so we are going to solve quadratic inequalities. We've solved quadratic equations. Now we're doing an inequality. This is all still part of the same section. You start out the same way as if it were an equation. In other words, if I said x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0, you would jump right in and do what? Yeah, factor and box method. So that's what we're going to do first. Can I do the shortcut? Yes. 1x squared, we can do the shortcut. I don't know why. Okay. So x squared breaks into x. What two numbers multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 1?
Negative 4.
Okay. Here's where it gets different. If you were just solving this equation, you would tell me x equals 4 and x equals negative 3, right? If it were an equal to. It's really, really tempting to say x is less than 4 and x is less than negative 3, but that is wrong. Because let me ask you a question. If I put in like -6, isn't -6 smaller than 4 and smaller than -3? Yeah. If I put that in, I would have -10 times -3, which is +30. Is that less than 0? No. So if both of those things are true, actually you had two negative numbers, it becomes positive and it's no longer smaller than 0. So there are a couple ways to do this. For the quadratics, I think our easiest option is to look at a graph. Now I'm going to have you draw just a really rough sketch for me. And I'm going to have you put the two numbers that make it equal 0 on your sketch. Going small to large, so I'd put the -3 on the left and the 4 on the right. Okay. If you remember something about quadratics, what's the graph of a quadratic look like? It's a U, right? As long as the x squared is positive, then it's just a normal looking U. What happens if it's a negative x squared? Flips it upside down. Now, worst case scenario, you can't remember what this graph is going to look like. What are you going to do? Yeah, you have the calculator on your Chromebook. You can graph it. These two numbers are the two places where it touches the x-axis. Now, if you're looking at your calculator, you're going to have an x and y axis and a lot more detail to it. But we know, because of the positive x squared, this would just be some kind of parabola. Really rough sketch. It's an upward facing U. Those are the two times it hits 0. Okay, my problem asks me when this would be less than 0. Less than 0, does that mean above or below the x-axis? Below. So this graph is below the x-axis there. So can we write that as an interval notation? When it starts at -3, does it equal to? We had just strictly less than, so parenthesis or bracket. Comma, ends at 4. Parenthesis. That means any number between -3 and 4 would make that original inequality true. So you could plug in a 0 or a 1 or something like that, and it would work. So on the quadratic inequalities, you will get some kind of interval like this. Does that one make sense to everyone? Any questions there? Want to try a couple more? Let's look at that one. So what's my first step? Factor, just like box method. Okay, x squared breaks into x and x. What two numbers multiply to -15 and add to -2?
-5 and 2.
So I need to ask myself, what two numbers would make that equal 0? Okay, so we're just going to draw ourselves a really rough sketch here, the -3 and the 5. What's my parabola look like? Just a U. The only thing that would change that would be if this were originally a negative, but if it were, before you did box method, what would you do? Yeah, you would have to get rid of that negative. So either factor it out or multiply both sides by -1. And when you did that, it would flip your inequality. So as long as you make the original x squared positive, then we're always going to be looking at this upward U. Okay. That's off. So those are the two places where it equals 0. Did I want the positives or the negatives? Less than or equal to 0 is less than, positive, or negative? Negative. So I'm wanting this piece again. Parenthesis or bracket? Be bracket -3, comma 5. It's a bracket. So the equal to throws in a bracket. Can we do some more? We've got a lot of time. Your assignment isn't that long. Let's get through some of these. What would I do here? You can't do the shortcut, you have to do the full box. So I need two numbers that multiply to -24, and they add up to +5. So what would that be?
-3 and 8.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2x squared and -3x, we could take out an x. 8x minus 12, we could take out a 4. 2x squared and 8x, we could take out 2x and -3. We figure out what makes each of those 0. So x plus 4, that would just be -4. If you can't tell what makes 2x minus 3 equals 0, just write it out and solve it. So that's a +3/2. So those are the two numbers. -4 goes on the left. We had a +2x squared to begin with, so it's just a normal upward parabola, which of course you could confirm on your calculator if you needed to. This time I asked for greater than or equal to 0. Greater than means positives. My graph is positive where it is above the x-axis, so that's here and here. So I have two separate pieces for my answer. The first one, it's essentially anything before -4 would work. So it's coming from, and the infinities always get a parenthesis, comma, ending at -4. We had an equal to, so that means the -4 gets bracket. When we have more than one piece, we put a big capital U in the middle. It means union. We're just going to combine these two. This next one starts at 3/2. It was equal to, so that's a bracket, comma, and it keeps going forever, so it ends at, and that's our final answer. So on these quadratic ones, you'll either have the section in the middle or the two ends to look at. Do we need another quadratic one? Yes.
So like when you shade, it would be like going out at the top.
Yeah. Alright, then I'm going to stop there. On Monday, I'm finishing this section. I may do one more quadratic example, maybe not, we'll see. And we're also talking about rational ones, so make sure you watch the video for that. Today's assignment, I'm not doing that one. So this first chunk is for today, and then Mondays we're just adding to it. So if you wanna go ahead and write down the problems for Monday, you can. Actually, I need to look and see. You already know how to do a good portion of Monday's work, if you chose to do that. But all of this homework then will be due on Tuesday. And I'm actually probably going to take off problem 96 on Monday. I'm probably only going to assign 7 problems on Monday. So you guys have quite a bit of time right now and you can get started.